This segment of the Bass, Kayak, and Beers podcast is sponsored in part by Dark Horse Tackle. Go to darkhorsetackle.com and use promo code BKB5 to save an extra $5 when you build your own box. Douglas Outdoors. Serious rods for serious anglers. Norsk Lithium. The lithium kayak battery you need is just a click away. Go to norsklithium.com. Catch Outdoors, the official measuring board for all 3 national trails. Go to catchoutdoors.com and use promo code BKB5 to save 5% on your next online purchase. What is going on, everyone? Welcome once again to the Bass, Kayak, and Beers podcast. This is the real life with your host, your boy Armando. We're going to have another great show as always, every Thursday at 7:30. At least we try to keep it every Thursday at 7:30 Central Time. We have a live show. If you're new to the channel or the podcast, we do have a live show, like I mentioned, Thursday, 7:30. And also, we do have a podcast that airs every Wednesday morning. That is hosted by Kurt Smith and Daniel Perry. And they do a lot of like the tips and tricks on kayak bass fishing to kind of help your game. They talked about techniques. They talk about season. They talk about lures. They talk about product reviews. So it's a great show. Again, that is every Wednesday morning at 5 a.m. It airs on YouTube, Facebook, and you can listen on any one of the most popular podcast streaming platforms: YouTube, not YouTube, Facebook, Spotify, Amazon Music, what else? Apple Podcasts. By the way, if you do listen to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can leave us a review. We really do appreciate it. It helps with the growth of the podcast. So today we're going to have a great episode. Like I mentioned, I have Justin Largen. If you're not familiar with Justin Largen, he's not just a great angler, but a great human being in general. It's always a pleasure to share the community with people like him. He's a great angler. Like I mentioned, he was runner-up a couple of years ago in the Bassmaster Kayak Series. And he also is the host of the Kayak Fishing Weekly on the Serious Angler Network. But he has his own podcast. If you're going to search for it, go search for Kayak Fishing Weekly. News, tips, and tricks, talking to tournament anglers and all that. One of my favorite kayak fishing podcasts out there. So go check it out. We're going to be talking about the final 2, the trails, the national trails, the Bassmaster Kayak Series and the Hobie B.O.S. are both going into the final event. Russ Snyder is leading AOI on both of those national trails. Russ Snyder, if you don't know him, he is, in my opinion, the best bass fishing angler out there, and he is just making a case every year for the best at all times. And so we're going to be talking about that. Justin is no stranger to being on the late season, heading into the last event as a leader. So we'll get his perspective of it, being that he's been in that position. We're also going to be talking about chasing smallmouth bass in early fall. One of you, I think it was Mike M, can't remember, suggested that episode. So we're going to be talking about a little bit about that. So if you have any questions for my guest for today, feel free to put it on the comments. Let us know where you're watching or listening from. We really do appreciate it. By the way, I forgot to do go live on Instagram. Let me add that on Instagram. So anyways, without further ado, let's bring in our guest, Justin Largen. How you doing, buddy?
I'm good, Armando. How are you?
Pretty good, man. Thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. I really do appreciate it. I know you have your own podcast. You're a busy man. So for you to take an hour or so of your weekday to come in and talk to me and to my listeners, so I really do appreciate it.
No, the pleasure's mine, and I appreciate the kind words.
Now, man, you are truly one of the best, my favorite people out there. We've gotten to talk in person at Caddo Lake. And I've had you on the podcast a couple of times, so it's always a pleasure talking to you. How is everything with the Kayak Fishing Weekly? Tell us about your podcast. Where can people listen to your podcast? Where can people follow you on social media? And when does the podcast usually air each episode?
So it's I guess we're real similar to your podcast. We're covering the kayak space. I feel like there's a growing number of the kayak podcasts out there. So it's cool that the listeners have plenty of people they can listen to get different perspectives from. Um, we try to put a show out every Thursday. I am not nearly as regimented and disciplined as you with that. A lot of times it ends up being every other Thursday. I was kind of a little behind schedule this week, so we've got an episode dropping with Dusty Yacker. Talking to him, we talked with him last night. That show should drop later this week. It'll be either tomorrow or Saturday, I think. But yeah, if people like to listen to your show, they might like mine too.
Oh, they'll like yours better than mine, probably.
It's
more professional,
fun.
More informative, I would say.
It's you've been doing it a lot longer than me. The technology stuff still gets me. Working through. Oh, there's an issue. Oh, the speaker's not working. Oh, the mic's not working.
Oh, I go through that pretty much every week.
Every time I go to screen share, I was like, how do I do this again?
If I miss a week, the next week it's like it's my first podcast ever or live show. You know, it's like, oh, today I just forgot to share it on Instagram. Just a couple of seconds there late. So it is what it is. But it's fun to do it, man. It's one of the pleasures of having a podcast is getting to talk to people that I wouldn't ordinarily get a chance to talk to, and at least for an hour, such as yourself. Now we can talk a little bit about tournament talk, and we can talk a little bit about chasing smallmouth bass in fall. So those conversations generally wouldn't just happen. You know, I typically don't go all during the week. You know, hey, I know you're with your family, but you want to talk for an hour. So that's kind of like the podcast, and that's actually why I got it started. You know, I didn't have anybody to show me around, so I figured maybe if I start a podcast, and with the understanding that I don't know anything about it and being upfront, but I'll get people to come on and talk to me about it. That'll be fun.
No, you're selling yourself short there. I enjoy yours.
Appreciate it.
And it's, I don't know, I've learned a lot because I got to do a few podcasts as a guest, but when I started it was really just, I mean, I feel like I lucked into it. I ran into Bailey Eichbert at a tournament, and we got to talking, and it was an idea that he had, and we kind of started it together. And he's already got a network that's built up. So
yeah,
my social media is not my skill. I'm old, and it's
we both are.
like Facebook. I didn't have Facebook for so many years, and really, I only started doing this stuff because of the fishing world. So, yeah, it's cool to work with a team like those guys. That there's multiple shows on that network that kind of cover different aspects of the fishing world, and I get to talk about kayak fishing. So it's hard for me to complain about that.
Yeah, I mean, Bailey Eichbert has really well, and I think if I'm not mistaken, that is actually his line of work, like marketing or something along those lines. And what he's built with the Serious Angler Network is great. I mean, you got the Serious Angler podcast, which is kind of tournament driven. Then they got the Lure Lab with Andrew Full, which is kind of like baits and techniques. Now they have yours, Kayak Fishing Weekly, which is predominantly kayak fishing. Then they also have Adam with Business from the Boat, which is kind of like the business side of things. And that's really cool. I haven't seen much of those. I think between the Serious Angler Network and Tackle Talk podcast, which congratulations to Andrew Hayes, just 5-year anniversary for the Tackle Talk podcast. Another great podcast that I listen to him. I'm like, I feel like such an amateur. I'm sorry, when I listen to him and then I kind of listen to myself my podcast. It's kind of funny. He does such a good job, both Bailey and Andrew Hayes.
I do the same thing. There's another one I've started listening to. I forget how many episodes they're up to now, but the Bass After Dark one. I enjoy listening to that, and then I hear, and it's cool when some of the kayak guys, Adam Reiser, I think was that's the first one that I remember getting on there. That was really cool hearing him talk. I think it was an electronics episode, but it's cool to see the kayak space kind of us growing and being a part of the like bass fishing world. Like we're not kind of this fringe thing. Like I feel like we're a part of everything. I mean, shoot, we
Yeah.
got a Bassmaster kayak series now.
Yeah. It's pretty awesome. And let's dive into that, because I mean, like I mentioned, you're no stranger to being in the lead heading into the last day of a tournament. And I know that may be painful memories,
Yes,
but
two of
bear
them.
with me. But heck, most of us would kill to be in that position to say, hey, at least I was there. But I mean, when we look at what Russ Snyder's doing, by the way, Russ Snyder, for those that are watching or listening, Russ Snyder is going to be next week. He is actually competing right now, or will be competing right now on the weekend. He's pre-fishing for the Pan American kayak fishing tournament. I don't know if that's the correct name. I know it's a Pan American, from what I understand, but
it's like an international deal, I think.
yeah,
right?
International deal. And by the way, shout out to my fellow countrymen from Puerto Rico. They're also going to be there, led by Guillermo Gonzalez. Can't think of a better leader for a team than Guillermo Gonzalez. So, but they got their hands full with Russ Snyder and Team USA, of course. So
yeah, it'd be fun. I'm curious to see how that one shakes out.
Yeah, Damon Tao from I think he's representing the Philippines there. He's from California. I really enjoy the format for that. I think it's really interesting, and I think it wasn't a month ago or a couple of weeks ago they had the world, not the world. So I'm competing with the I don't know what was
I'm blanking
it.
on what it was called.
It
Like,
was in
Italy.
Canada, right?
Was it Canada?
No, Canada. There's another thing going on,
maybe
but that's the bass boat.
it. I know Italy won.
Yes,
and I thought that was where they had it. I thought it was in Italy in the home country one, but I could be wrong.
You're right. Yes, it was in Italy. Now that I remember, Russ Snyder was in Italy. Yeah, in Canada, they had or they're having another international tournament, but I think that's bass boats, not necessarily kayak, or not related to kayak bass fishing. But let's talk about that, man, because when you look at what Russ Snyder is doing, and by the way, he is leading in points right now. Let me share actually the screen on this. Share screen on the Hobie B.O.S. He is, well, actually, this is not counting Chickamauga, which he won. So he has 200 points on that. So we eliminate his lowest score, which is 195, which that's ridiculous.
Yes.
So we add another 5 points. He is 597 points. Christian Fisher 591. And you remind me, I don't know how he did on that last tournament, but either ways, he's 590. So 7 points separate the top three. And then when we go into the Bassmaster Kayak Series, he's also, and I'll try to find it later. I know I have it there's somewhere in the standings, probably in Facebook. He's also leading on that tournament by a little bit of a bigger margin. What do you think about what Russ Snyder has been doing this season? And, in retrospect to what he's done throughout his career?
It's incredible. Like he was kind of the one that, like, he's not the one that got me started tournament fishing, but he was one of those names that, watching the coverage that Chad Hoover did with some of the KBF tournaments, those national championships. He was just one of those faces you'd always see when I was, like I said, not competing, but looking at it just as a fan. So when I started it, he was like one of the guys, like, I want to beat that guy. And I very naively thought that I could compete with Russ. And Russ is just on a different level from the rest of us. Like, I think I was talking to Drew Gregory about it. We stayed together at one event, and I remember I was chatting about, I think it was a couple years ago. I don't remember if it was 21 or 22, but the year that I think it was the year Christine won on Eufaula. I think Russ was, if he wasn't leading the tournament, he was towards the top of it.
Yeah.
And I think he was near the top of the standings for the Hobie B.O.S. series that year. And he, mistakenly went into an off limits area, I guess a marina that had some signs he didn't see, something along those lines, and ended up having his catch DQ'd. And then I think that was the same year that he and Cody were down at Caddo neck and neck. I think it was a point or two that separated them in the Angler of the Year race. So he was like a whisker from winning the KBF Angler of the Year and the
Yeah.
Hobie Angler of the Year the same year. And I just remember it, a couple crazy events, and he didn't end up, I think Cody edged him out with the one, and then in the Hobie one, that, that first day DQ just kind of, and that takes you out of it really.
Yeah.
But it's not like he's not been in this situation before. And I think he's going to do the opposite. Like I honestly, I'll kind of be surprised if he doesn't win both. He's just had such a dominant year. He hasn't had any bad events, and I don't know how he does it, because seemingly I'll have a good event every once in a while, and he's like the inverse. Like I don't think he's had a bad event all year. I'm curious to see what his lowest finish is, but it's
on this
insane.
season, on this, at least on the no, crap. Here it is.
Like, I don't know if he's fallen to 20th or 30th.
181. No, so his worst finish, I think, is 19th this year at Sam Rayburn. 181.
That is insane.
Yes. And it really puts it in perspective, like you mentioned. There's and by the way, this is not a done deal. Russ Snyder, I think the first year that Drew Gregory won AOY, which, by the way, Drew Gregory won it with just fishing 3 events for the Hobie B.O.S. If I'm remembering correctly, I think it was that same year. Russ Snyder was leading, and I think by a considerable margin heading into the TOC, which at that point it was twice the points. I think it's, if you won the TOC, you got double the points. So that tournament, the TOC, he did not. I don't think he even caught a limit on one or both days, and he ended up losing the AOY race. And I think Drew Gregory won it that year. So it's not a done deal. He has struggled in some of the big events in the Hobie B.O.S. in the TOC in the past, but I mean, this might be the year that he kind of, it's crazy to say it considering all the success he has, but kind of shuts down the demons of the TOC that he's had, because like you mentioned, there'd been a couple of years that it seemed like he was going to win AOY, and then the TOC didn't pan out like he wanted it to. That being said, he did win AOY for the Bassmaster Kayak Series last year, which at that point has been the most competitive. I think that's the biggest attendance, if I'm not mistaken, in the Bassmaster Kayak Series. That's the year that it took like a big leap in growth, which was more competitive. So he has won it in what's been so far the toughest year to win a Bassmaster Kayak Series. Again, granted, the AOY race has only been there 2 years, I think, right? Like Drew Gregory won the first one, and then Russ Ryder won the second one, right?
And I think
so. It's not like a long.
We're
history.
on year 3.
Yeah,
but he's writing it to where it's going to be very hard to like, I think, for anybody to beat what he's doing. It's it's pretty insane. Like to give Drew credit, winning 3 tournaments. I think it was 3 consecutive tournaments with the Bassmasters in 2022.
He won. Yes, he did.
To run away with that Angler of the Year race. That's incredible.
Yeah.
But Russ is, I'll almost be surprised. And like you said, it's not a done deal, any of these races, but he's just fishing so good. I forget who I was talking to the other day, but I was like, I don't think he's human. He's like a robot. He doesn't, he's an alien from the future with he's incredible.
He makes it look so easy. That's the scary part about fishing against him. It's like, it just comes so natural to him. Like I go into tournaments and thinking I think I have a plan, but fish don't always cooperate. In my case, for the most part, they don't. And even when sometimes I think I struck gold, I feel like I wasn't necessarily figuring out. More than anything, I just like bumped into fish and was able to, work hard to find a fish and actually find them. But it wasn't like, okay, this is plan A. I'm going to go to plan A. I'm going to go to this spot. I'm going to throw this bait and I'm going to catch my limit real early. And it seems for him, it's just like a foregone conclusion. This is just like, yeah, this is my plan. I'm going to go here. I'm going to throw this bait. Might as well just take one rod, one bait, because that's all you're going to need.
Yeah.
That's what the perception. Obviously, he would probably tell you that's a lot harder than that. But it's amazing. Every time I think there's somebody out there challenging him as the best overall angler, Cody Milton did it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, through a space of about 3 or 4 years, they were neck and neck. And there were times where Cody Milton was just, you would think, hey, I think Cody Milton might actually be better than Russ Snyder, but then Russ Snyder would go on a streak, win 2 or 3 in a row, and then you're like, well, maybe not. There was a year I think Guillermo Gonzalez had an amazing year too, and I think that's the KBF championship on Cado, where him and Cody Milton were just kind of trading punches every day. It was a 3-day tournament. They were both pulling in 100 inches every day. The last day was just a leapfrog. Like Guillermo would have 100, then Cody would have 101, then Guillermo would have 103, and so on and so forth. And at the end, Guillermo prevailed. But there's been a couple of anglers here and there that have challenged him on specific years. Drew Gregory, of course, is another one.
Ewan Minor too.
Ewan Minor. So that's my point. I was just about to lead into Ewan Minor. Ewan Minor, to me, I thought, considering that he was knocking on the door on the Hobie B.O.S, and by the points rule, you could make a case as he was actually the AOY winner. But, then the point rules changed, and then that screwed him. And that would have been like if you flip-flop the rules one year for another, he would actually have won 3 AOYs in a row. But the way the rules were one year kind of screwed him over. And then the next year they changed. And then he would have won it if the rules hadn't changed, which is kind of funny.
Gotcha.
And then the third year he actually won, which was past years. He has a chance to repeat. I think he will be the only angler to repeat on AOY on a Hobie B.O.S. Again, Hobie B.O.S. It's not like it's like the NFL or NBA. You have this for decades. It's a relatively, not a relatively. It is a young sport. But even with that, I look at your mind and I think like, okay, this guy might challenge Russ Snyder just because he's so good at moving water. He's so good at highland type reservoirs. Even though he will say he's not great in grass, he still does pretty good. In Cado, where it was, guess you can't get any grassier than Cado, I don't think. So overall, yeah, he's the complete package, and he's young and he's hungry.
But still in college.
Yes, and then you see Russ Snyder just, the next year Russ Snyder comes and does something like he's doing this year, and you're like, never mind. It just doesn't think like there's anything you can do to beat this guy.
No, not right now, not this year. And who knows I've experienced on a much smaller scale what it feels like to kind of be on a roll and kind of in a rhythm. And like 2022 was a very good year for me.
Yeah.
But I've been extremely inconsistent since then. And Russ is right there every year. Like, and there's those guys, all those guys we talked about. It seems like they're always in the hunt. But Russ is just, I don't know how else to say it other than he's the best right now.
Yeah.
I don't know that you could, I don't know that there's anybody that can dispute that if he puts up two AOYs, for competing trails in the same year. And I mean, we didn't even talk about Chickamauga this past weekend.
Yes.
I mean, it hadn't even been a week. He won a 2-day tournament by 20.25 inches. I mean, it was tough for a lot of people. I think less than half the field caught a limit both days. Russ put up 99 and I forget what
91 and a half. Yeah.
Insane. I mean, he put up 190 inches for 2 days and won by 20 inches.
And to put it in perspective, and sorry to interrupt, like the top 11 caught a 2-day limit. And this is talking about 85 anglers. Only the top 11 caught a 2-day limit. Everybody from 12th down actually either didn't catch a limit on one day or the other or both days. So that goes to show you how tough. It's like, it's not one of those tournaments where, late fall or early fall season where it's like, all right, fish are biting everywhere. this was like, was a grinder, and he still managed to just, I mean, like you mentioned, he's 190 inches, 190.75 inches, second place, 170.5 inches. That is insane. That is a 20.25 inch difference.
I don't know how many points. I'd have to pull the listing up again and see, but it's statistically the best you could do. Like, he's only a few points off the best that you can mathematically do.
Yeah, it's right here.
What is it? 200 points per
event.
Win?
So 600 would be the maximum, right? And he is at, well, let's add 5 points. So he's only 3 points shy of getting the max.
It just an insane year.
Yeah, that's crazy. Christian Fisher obviously has had a great year as well. There's so many storylines behind all this. You think about, okay, on the Bassmaster Kayak Series side, it's only its third year, but he's could be able to be the first one to go back to back. On the Hobie B.O.S side, the first one, and I don't think he actually has he won AOY in the Hobie B.O.S? Ross Snyder, you would think he has, but I don't think he has.
Was 21 the first year they did one?
I wish I can go. Let me see if I can.
I think that was the year Drew won.
Yeah.
And then was 2022 was Jordan Marshall. And then last year Ewing.
Yes. So 2021, Russ, that's the one that you thought he was going to win. And then he had a really bad day. 2021 is Jordan Marshall. Hey, yo, what? What's it, Jordan Marshall? No, I think this is, total for 3 days. Hey, what? Jordan Marshall 2021?
So I'm forgetting somebody then.
I thought Jordan Marshall won it. But I think it's been more than 20. I don't think it shows up on its website, but I think it started in 2019, didn't it?
You could be right.
It just doesn't show up on the website.
Gotcha.
Because it only goes back to AOY. I keep hitting 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024. So I know Drew Gregory won one. So, and it was before Jordan Marshall. So
it must have been 2020 for Drew?
2020.
Okay.
2020, and I think 20. I'm assuming it could be that was the first year, but I'm not completely sure. But regardless, it's still an amazing accomplishment. Now he can actually be the first one to win both in the same year. He's already won the KBF, and he's already won the 10, which to me, in my opinion, even though it's only 10, but it's really the top 10 on KBF. Unfortunately, that tournament does no longer exist. But that's a real accomplishment. Just to qualify for the 10, you had to finish in the top 10 in the KBF standings and actually win it. And also, he has won the Kayak Bass Fishing Championship, which is an open. It's more of an open, not really a championship. But I mean, I remember the year that Mike Elsa won it. I think we have like 400 entries or something like that.
It was huge.
Yeah. So
I know they've had, because those were years that was before I started competing, but I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was, I think my first year, the first one I went to was Caddo in 21, I guess.
That's why I met you in person. Yes.
I think there were 300 people at that one. It was well attended anyway.
Yes.
But I've heard they've had as many as 5, 6. It might even have been 7. I know it was a ton of people in some of those early ones.
Yeah,
and that's part of how you get those giant payouts. Yeah,
Mike Else, I think he won it on the biggest year that they had. I think it was somewhere like if anybody that's watching knows, you can put it up in the comment section. I feel like I'm exaggerating, but I think I've heard something like 700. I know Mike Elsa won like 80 something grand or something like that.
Yeah.
So
there have been some very big payouts.
Yeah. Unfortunately, like we mentioned, KBF does not. I think I don't know if they still have the national championship. I know they have something called the Knucklehead, which is pretty interesting. They've kind of gone back to what really their bread and butter was, which is the online series, which has been very productive for them. And I think it serves a purpose for those people that want to get into tournaments, but are kind of hesitant to, you know, donate 250 or $300 to Russ Snyder's costs. And so, the monthly online is pretty cool. It lets people kind of get the feel of, how to prepare for a tournament, how to hold the fish, take pictures, and avoid those mistakes when the entry fee is a little bit bigger and the
Yeah.
stakes are a little bit higher.
There's a lot of cool things. Like you don't have to
Yeah.
travel for it. I mean, you can
Yeah.
fish close to home. It and it kind of gets your feet wet. And then I think it's really been and will continue to be like a feeder system for these other
Yeah.
tournaments. That's kind of where you start and learn, like you said, what to do and not to do, and then you grow into some of these bigger tournaments where you're traveling and the stakes are a little higher.
Yeah. The other storyline on the tournament side of things is Christine Fisher. She's sitting right now sick with like 8 points behind or 7 points behind um Russ Snyder. No, actually 6 points behind Russ Snyder if you count Chickamauga. So she has the potential now to solidify herself not just the best female angler, but one of the best overall anglers in the kayak bass fishing. She's also doing the Open Series, which I think has helped her game. Because now when it's iron sharpens iron. When she's competing on one side on the boat side series, you're still learning, right? You
Mhm.
still, you still get to experience tournaments. You still get to test new bodies of water. You still get to put in practice some of the things you learn and improve on them. So by her doing that, actually, I think has helped her game in the kayak bass fishing side of things. And we've seen her progression. I know she's won the TOC previous year. That was just a great moment watching it on video. She going through the emotions, the tears of actually at that point, she didn't know she won, but once she caught her last fish, it was a 3-day tournament and it seemed like the weight was off her shoulders. And just either it was kind of like, all right, it doesn't matter. As long as it was a decent fish, it was pretty much would have would have gotten her the win. But even if even if she didn't know at the time, just the weight off her shoulders to say, I caught 5 fish
Yeah,
the
she gave
three
herself a shot.
days. Yeah. She gave herself a shot. And, it was fun and interesting to watch her go through the emotions, of that. You feel like the weight off your shoulders when you're not. This. I haven't experienced this quite as well as you do, but talk to me about the feeling you get when you're in a 2-day tournament, for example, and you caught that 10th fish. How do you feel when you're like, all right, finally, I gave myself a shot. Now let's see where it all falls.
Yeah, it sort of depends. Like for me, if it's because I've had it where I've got 5 little rats that I know, you're happy to have them until you have them, and then once you've got that fifth fish, it's like, all right, well now I gotta upgrade all these
Yeah.
fish. So I've had some where plenty of them where it's like that, where you've got small fish and you feel a little bit more comfortable, but you know that you still got work to do. And I've had some other ones where I just need one bite, and I know I'm right there with a chance to win, and I just need the bite, and it's a really really good feeling when that happens, because it seems like, I mean, honestly, most of the time it doesn't work out. Most of us are not Russ Snyders where you need one more bite, or even if you put yourself in contention, it just there's so many variables and it doesn't always work out. But those times where it does, like for me, Winnipesaukee uh, in 2022 was, I had 9 fish and I had a really solid average. I knew I needed one, and I had about a 4-hour lull, something like that. So when I finally got number 5 and it was an 18 plus inch fish, like I was on cloud 9. I went from that, stress, like, what do I do? Am I doing, do I need to make a move? What do I do? We got a couple hours left in the tournament. So to catch a good fish where, okay, now I've got a good, I've already sort of done the work. I'm at least, going to get a check. And now you can kind of I don't know. It's like you said, it's a big burden off your shoulders, and then just um, I don't know. It's a really good feeling. I've only
Yeah.
experienced it a few times.
Yeah, no, like I said, unless you're Russ Snyder, it kind of feels like
Yeah.
an accomplishment. But like, yeah, another top 10 finish.
Yeah.
But let me ask you this. Now you've been there, leading into the last day of the tournament. Overall, do you think that being in, whether it's Russ Snyder position or Christine Fisher second place, or whoever is in second place in the Bassmaster Kayak Series, um, does do you look at the leaderboard and say, all right, I'm just gonna try to catch my fish and make sure I don't get skunked, so I won't drop too far down, so I won't lose the AOY? Or do you look at one, or do you just go, I'm not gonna change anything about what I do. I'm just gonna fish like there was no AOY implications on the line? Do you at some point say, okay, I'm falling behind, I'm gonna switch to a bait that if it's going to land me something, it's going to be something big? Do you go for like a Hail Mary? Have you gone through that? Is there a game within the game when you're going into the last day of the AOY, whether you just fish the way you've always feel like fishing, or there's a strategy involved to make sure you either don't drop down too far, or make sure you make a big hit to leapfrog into the leader spot in the AOY race?
That's a really good question. And I don't know, for me, I've only been in that position the one time, and I'd kind of messed up on day one. I can't remember if I had 3 or 4 fish. I came in without a limit the first day, and I knew I took myself kind of out of contention, that Drew would, in that 2022 season, Drew would really have to mess up. Uh, like, he pretty much just needed to catch a fish. But if I had been in a little better position, if I'd actually done my job the first day and caught him decent, um, it probably would have depended. Maybe I would have would fished a little more conservatively. I really don't know. Like, I probably, knowing me, I probably would have fished more conservatively and then regretted it later. Like, gone out there and tried to drag a finesse worm or a drop shot around and just try to get 5 bites and protect it. But like I said, I guess the way that it actually worked out, it was it was almost like, because it did so bad the first day, it was kind of there was not really pressure for me on day 2. It was just, that was about as close as I've come to leaving a tournament early. I was just so frustrated that I was in such a good position and then didn't. I thought it was almost impossible at that point for me to win. It was going to take somebody else messing up.
It was
And
out
the
of your hands, kind of thing.
Yeah, the only thing that really, because that tournament was gonna, like, there was no way for me to make up enough ground the second day to basically have that be one of my top 3 finishes. So my points were what they were at that point. And the only thing that convinced me to stay was like, I want to be a good sport, and I want to congratulate Drew or Mark or whoever ended up taking home that trophy. I wanted to be there to shake their hand. But fishing wise, it was pretty crushing to know that I blew it that first day.
What is that? Does that carry over? Do you feel like I'll tell you my perspective on it. I remember Dardanelle going into and I've mentioned this on the podcast before, um, an hour, 45 minutes into lines out the first day, I'm in first place. And I felt like, man, that's a lot of pressure. And I started getting text messages. It's like, now I'm in first place. And it would seem like I was going to end the day in first place. Then Garrett Morgan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Garrett Morgan, actually, to my surprise, which was only like an inch below me, I stopped fishing once I realized, all right, it's only 45 minutes left. I'm not going to burn my spot. I don't regret my decision at that time, but I was like, that's it. I'm either gonna end up in first place more than likely, or in the top 3 at least, because I know Jackson Rambonis, the young kid who actually ended up winning it, was in second place, and then Garrett Morgan, I think, was in third place. So even if one of them leapfrogs me, it's not going to be by a lot. So it's still manageable for day one. I figured I'd rather do that than A, burn my spot, or B, catch a fish that now I can't catch on day two. And for those that don't know, if you catch a fish, you remember, you take a picture of it, that same fish, you can't catch it on day two by accident. Obviously, you're not going to do it on purpose. But Ryan Lambert went through that where he caught one fish. He thought he had it in the bag. And then turns out one of the fish that he caught, he actually had caught the day before in that same spot. It's not cheating, of course, because you have no control over if your fish bites your lures 2 days in a row. But that was going through my mindset. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna stop fishing. At worst, I'm gonna end up third. Ended up being second, and me being second, actually, I felt the pressure relief. I'm like, all right, now nobody's looking at the leaderboard and thinking, oh, Armando's leading on day one. Is he gonna choke on day two, kind of thing. Going into day two, it still haunts me. I still have nights where I just stay awake thinking about what would I've done. Like, I caught 4 fish. My fish was 11 inches. If it would have been 12 inches, I would have been 7th place. If I would have caught a 16-incher, I actually would have won the tournament. And it still haunts me. And I still look back like I thought I did everything by the book. Like I did what you've always been taught to do. Don't burn your spots, move around, don't force the bite, look for it. And it keeps haunting me. Like, to you, what long term do you still, and I don't mean to open old wounds, and I apologize if I am, but do you still go through that, or it's just like, it's just amnesia and try to forget about it?
Yeah, I don't think about the tournaments as much. I definitely don't think about 2022 as much. Because as much as I felt like I blew that one day, like Drew had an awesome year. And to be in a position where he could have, tried to just be conservative, because he had those 2 wins and this was going to be his 3rd event. All he had to do was finish, I think, 10 places or so ahead of me in the standings. Yeah, and that's not to say somebody else couldn't move up, but I knew, at least for me, I had to beat him by 10 places or more to have a chance. And I felt like Drew just won it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't do my job necessarily, but even if I had, Drew did, Drew just won. The one that still stings a little bit is last year at the TOC, having a lead going into that final day, and then just, it's kind of like your scenario at Dardanelle, just coming up a fish short. I had the biggest limit of the tournament the second day, and then on day 3, I put up, by far my smallest limit. I think I was almost 20 inches lower, 15 inches lower than the previous day. I had a 12-incher in the bag that's like, I just knew I was going to run into another 18-inch fish. Put up, I think I had 93 the second day, and it was just, I quit fishing at one point because I felt kind of like you, like I was hurting myself. Like, all right, I'm just 17-inch fish don't help me right now. But they'll be big the next day. And, I was in a position where a couple of decent bites and it could have gone a different way. So that one I think about probably more than the other year, the anger of the year situation. But it, like, the other part of your scenario, like, I feel like I have changed my thought process a little bit, because I used to be very conservative with, got to ease up on the fish, in certain tournaments anyway. It's kind of situational, like a bed fishing tournament where I know I've got, maybe 15 or 20 good fish, and I don't want to, catch one on day 1 that's not going to help me on day 2. So I've eased up in those situations, but for the most part anymore, I've kind of done away with that. I try to catch as much as I can in a 2-day. I'm going to catch as much as I can, and then just try to figure it out the next day and go catch as much as I can again. I think that's the better way to win. I think you can be really consistent, kind of easing off fish, but I see other guys just, a lot of the guys that I look up to, somebody like a Jody Queen, just kind of watching his mindset. I think he's more of a, I'm going to catch everything I can catch this day, and then go out and the next day catch everything I can catch. And if that means, you have to move areas or change your presentation, expand your area a little bit, You know, it's ultimately about figuring the fish out. Um, and you know, I, I guess to summarize it, yeah, my mindset has changed a little bit. I'm a whole lot less, or I guess I'm more willing to gamble than I used to be. Like to me, I wish I was more consistent. I'd love to have more top 15, 20 finishes. Um, but at the end of the day, it's the big paydays, that first place prize. You know, only the top three get those trophies.
Yeah.
Um, like that's what I care about. And if, you know, if I gamble and end up, you know, falling out of at a check range or you know, kind of take myself out of it, I'd rather do it kind of swinging for the fences than just laying off of the fish, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. And it's one of those strategies where it's kind of like that age-old debate. Do I stay in an area, break down the area, or do I continually move, and try to cover more ground? Kind of like the KVD school of thought, which is mathematical. The more casts I make, the more chances I'll get to catch a fish. Um, do you? What are your thoughts on that? When you look at your game, do you change it situationally depending on the fishery, or do you generally are break down an area, stay within that area, and try to make it work, or are you more of the mind of like, let me cover more ground, let me do more casts, the more casts I throw, the more chances mathematically that I'll get a fish?
I'm kind of in between. I think I've done it both ways before, and it sort of depends on the tournament. I know I've gotten myself in trouble in bed fishing tournaments, trying to, you know, like, okay, I've got however many different beds in this area and trying to like plan out every little minute detail of the day. Okay, I'm going to go to this one first and then go to this one and then go to this one. And if this one doesn't bite, I'm going to go over here to that one. And just, it's like you can definitely overthink stuff like that. Um, but yeah, like for me, I don't know. Maybe it's just a weird circumstances, but I've had so many days where I have a good first day, or tournaments where I have a good first day, and then the second day it doesn't work when I go back to the same area, and I don't know if it's like some kind of mental block. I have overcome that a few times, but it's for the most part, I try if I'm in a small area and really pounding on it, I try not to go back to that same area on day two. I try to just think, all right, you beat that up, you caught what's there. Let's go look at something different, and try to figure out, expand on that pattern, try to find something similar to it. Um, and I know other guys that can go in and just continue to milk areas multiple days in a row, but for the most part, it hasn't worked well for me. I think I tend to, I guess, stay in an area and just dissect it too much. And yeah, I mean, I've had days where I've sat in a grass bed and in the same couple hundred yards and just done laps, especially in some tidal tournaments where it's just an area I know that fish are using. They move through the area, and if I feel like the right fish are there, I'll sit in it all day. But then it's hard to go back and sit in the same little stretch a second day in a row for me anyway. But it's, you know, again, I don't have Russ's track record, so don't
The
don't necessarily anybody listen to me.
yeah, we're just spitballing here. Like we're just nothing here is officially taken
No.
with a grain of salt, right? Now, you obviously, you have accomplished a lot, so you're obviously one of the top anglers right now, in the sport, considering all that you've accomplished. When you're talking about, sitting on a spot, that kind of reminds me of Brian Nelly, I think his last name, when he won the TOC in Lake Cado.
Mhm.
Like halfway through day 3, he stopped fishing and just started having lunch and lay back because I think he has something like 30 inches lead halfway through day 3. Like he's like, nah, I'm done. Nobody's gonna catch up to me. But it was one of those things where it's like everything comes together. He found a spot on pre-fishing that was loaded with fish, and it's a double-edged sword, because if you say like, all right, I found this spot, If this spot doesn't produce for the next 3 days, which that's the caveat of the Hobie B.O.S. It's not a 2-day, the TOC, I should say. It's not a 2-day tournament, the 3-day tournament, which I like that because it really, if you win the TOC, not that if you won the Bassmaster Kayak Series, doesn't mean you don't earn it, but the TOC is earned. There's no luck involved in that. You're not gonna get lucky and cast the biggest 3-day bag just out of sheer luck, right? There has to be some strategy. There has to be, of course, there's some luck involved, but it's like the age old proverb, luck is a product of working hard or byproduct of working hard. But I'm going here on a tangent. But talking about Brian Nelly, that year, he found it on pre-fishing. It was a gamble. If it doesn't, maybe day one, you think, well, they're here in the day before the tournament. They'll probably be here day one. It was day two. He's like, well, maybe they're there. Oh, we'll see. Why not? Oh, they're still there. Day three is like, man, I'm just at this point, you're thinking, what if they're not there? What do you do now? What do you do now? But fortunately for him, they were there. And obviously, it wasn't something out of luck. He put in like I mentioned, it's a byproduct of him working hard to find that spot. And listening to him talking about that tournament, like where he found it, he mentioned that he was curious to see what was holding the fish. Was there a trunk? Why were those fish congregating in that patch of grass? But his mentality was like, it's like the golden goose. You don't kill it to see why it's producing golden eggs. He's like, they're there for a reason. I'm just going to stay as far away where I can still cast and catch them, but I'm not even going to get close to see what it is. It's like, it's there. Whatever the reason it's holding them. We don't need to know the reason. We just want to hope and pray that they're still there. But it, like you mentioned, it's that thing where you like, when you find that, I remember Michael Cates on Possum Kingdom last year, where he broke the record for the lake for that Mark Pendergraft held for the championship, which I think it was 210 inches. And Michael Cates ended up with a 2-day limit of 212. We thought nobody was going to beat Mark Pendergraft. Well, guess what? Next tournament on that lake, he actually beat the record. It was the same thing. It was just like, they're there. Like, I remember Michael Cates talking about day one. He was back home eating breakfast at 10 a.m. because I think it was lining like at 7:30. From 7:30 to like 9, he already had 100 plus inches. It's like, there's no point in me beating this fish to the ground. Let's just leave her here. Nobody sees me fishing here. Let's just go home.
I want to run into a school like that, like just one time.
Yeah.
My style doesn't lend towards it, but yeah, I want to learn the offshore game and find a school like that, like just once, to know what that feels like to just have, hundreds of giant bass in your area that you can go back to.
It's got to be like a sublime feeling.
Oh my gosh. Like to go home at 10, I've laid up before, but nothing. I've never with a limit like that.
Yeah.
I think it was that same Winnipesaukee tournament. That was a bed fishing deal, some fry garters, and I didn't have much found in practice. So in that tournament, once I got to 90 inches the first day, I backed off. I caught a 17 plus. I think that it upgraded me by a 1/4 inch, and I thought I messed up by catching that fish. I was like, that fish would have been worth 17 tomorrow, and it only gave me a 1/2 inch today.
Yeah.
But I think that's the only time. It's the only time I can think of in a tournament where I'm done fishing now. It's just time to go look for stuff for tomorrow. It's been one time so far, and a lot of tournaments, where that's not been the case.
Yeah, the closest I've gone to something like that, where like Brian Nelly situation, same thing, Lake Dardanelle. I did 3 days of pre-fishing, and all 3 days I caught 5 fish, but they weren't really big. I was like, yeah, it's only like a 70 plus bag each day. So I was like, well, it's kind of a toss up. Let me at the end of the day, I figured I'm going to launch right next to it was in a boat ramp. I didn't launch where I wasn't supposed to, just to make it clear. But it was right next to where we're staying. So I was like, this is the closest one. I've caught pretty much similar numbers on all of them. Might as well start where it's closest. And if it doesn't work, then I can, because I don't have to drive too long to my spot, I can just, hop back, load up again and try another spot. And I remember catching 2 fish the first 7 hours of the tournament, and then the last hour in 15 minutes, I caught a 19-incher, an 18-incher, and a 17-incher, or something along that. I know the biggest one was 19 3/4, which in Lake Dardanelle, I was like, that's a giant.
Yeah, that was a stingy tournament, I remember.
Yeah. And they were on that spot. And I remember finding that spot. I was thinking, because all of a sudden I see this school of bait fish jumping, and something big was jumping behind it. And I was like, I'm willing to gamble that's not a gar. I'm going to say that's a bass. And sure enough, it was. And I remember almost not being able to sleep that night. And the next day, it's like, I got to go to that spot, and thinking, just praying to God, please let him be there. Please let him be there. I got to the boat ramp. There was nobody at that boat ramp. I got there so early, thinking I need to get ready early. I need to be out by launch and beat anybody to the spot that I caught him. And I'm thinking that spot is going to be packed. There was nobody. I was sitting in I was holding the boat dock for an hour waiting for lunchtime. Like I think lunch was at 6:30. I got there at 5. I was already in the water by 5:30. I was in and out. It's like, man, an hour here. And if you've ever been to Dardanelle, it's not like Possum Kingdom or any of these places where there are houses all over the lake and there's lights everywhere. This was a forest. You can see my headlamp would, point to the woods, and I would see eyes looking at me. I don't know what they were, but I just see the reflection of the eyes. Is like, this is crazy. But being like, as soon as I got to my spot, I missed one. And I've never been so happy that I missed the bite, because that showed me, okay, they're here. And I remember stop fishing, just thanking God. It's like, they're here. Okay, they're still here. And I actually ended up catching 3 on that spot, and then I couldn't catch anything else on that spot. I had to move on, catch another spot. But that's the closest I've been to, hey, having a spot that produced. And it was only like 3 bass in 15 minutes kind of thing, but they were quality bass. But nothing like, like you mentioned, like where there's like Michael Cates or Brian Nelly, was just like, okay, the plethora, embarrassment of riches when it comes to big bass. But exactly. It's still fun.
Yeah, I'll take 3 fish in 15 minutes. Most days, I'm pretty happy with that.
Yeah, definitely. Especially when you struggle to, like myself, try to get a 2-day limit. But no, I mean, it's amazing. I've loved to see. It's so sad that as right now, those type of events, kayak bass fishing tournaments, are not televised. I would be glued to the TV, at least on day 2, trying to see if Russ Nard is about to make history, or who's gonna, challenge him. Is Ewan Minor gonna put up an amazing day and beat him and steal AOY from him? Is he gonna win? Is Russ Nard gonna win AOY on both tournaments, Bassmaster and Hobie B.O.S? So it's sad that we're not there at that place, but hopefully we'll be there soon. At some point. And just a shout out here to Dave Erke. By the way, another kayak fishing podcast coming up soon. Though I think it's called The Whole Angler. Whole as in complete, not as in whole. So it says, what's Justin's major accomplishment? So what is your major accomplishment, Justin?
Shoot, major life accomplishment.
Well, I don't think I think he's adding as in, what is the hardest struggle he overcame outside of fishing? Oh, it is life.
Huh.
All right. Yeah.
That's tough.
We're going deep here.
I don't know. Hardest thing to overcome outside of fishing. I don't know. I was pretty proud, I guess, of the job that I had for many years, kind of before I started the kayak fishing. Before I came into that scene, I kind of started it was a security company, and I was fresh out of school. I think I was 21, maybe about to turn 22, and started kind of at the very bottom of that company and sort of worked my way up across. I was there for about 14 years and worked my way into a senior management position. And there was no individual, like one struggle that I can think of. But it was just kind of a maybe a longer term growth over that period of me sort of growing as a person and learning what it's like to be a leader and kind of taking care of your people. Um, I think that was probably the biggest life accomplishment for me, was sort of working my way, navigating through that through those ranks and sort of growing along the way. That was that that took a lot of time, a lot of effort.
Yeah. You know, when we think about kayak bass fishing, how hard it can be and all that, and the accomplishment we forget, you know, life in general has so much, uh, there's so much more, right? But it kind of puts it in perspective.
Mm, definitely. Yeah, what we're doing, catching little green and brown fish,
Yeah.
in the grand scheme of things, is not that big of a deal.
At least unless you're Russ Snyder, it probably is. That's like 100% of your livelihood, I would imagine. It'd be nice to be able to, hey, you know, I did, but I'm sure that's not all he's doing, but it'd be nice to just say, you know what, honey, I'm gonna go fish because I'm gonna catch a check. Don't worry about it. It's almost,
Yep.
it's 99% that at least I'm gonna catch a check, and it's gonna be, you know, within the, I don't know, 4-digit realm.
Yep.
It's a nice feeling for sure.
Yeah, there's a handful of guys that
And
have some
girls.
very, yeah, Christine. There's a handful that have very, very impressive resumes. Like I'm there there's only a few that I feel like there's only one Russ so far.
Yeah.
And we mentioned some of the other ones we mentioned are very close, but it's, I mean, the kayak space, well, really fishing in general, and it really kind of hit home seeing some of the elite guys this year that walked away from the tournaments, or at least walked away from the elite series, just looking at it like, hey, I got to do what's best for me and my family. And like fishing tournaments competitively is hard, and it's not the most financially secure thing you can do.
Yeah.
It's almost the opposite of that. Uh, so yeah, for the fact that anybody can even come close to making a living in the kayak world with sort of our payouts is very impressive.
Yeah. When you think about sports in general, you think about basketball or, yeah, basketball play, because that, or soccer play. Those are probably two of the sports that are more global, right? Baseball is pretty much United States. NFL is pretty much United States. But globally, I would say there are two. Well, tennis you can mention as well. But when you think about, you know, basketball, right? A young kid plays basketball or soccer. Even if you're not the elite, you think about, well, I may not be in the elite, but am I good enough to, you know, compete in the European League or a smaller league that still, you know, has a considerable paycheck, not being made in the millions. But, you know, when you talk about bass fishing, whether it's the boat or kayak bass fishing, and to do it for a living, like Russ Snyder, Christian Fisher, and a few others, it's like, it's not like, well, if I'm not good enough for the elites, at least I'm good enough for, no, there's nothing else. Like there's nothing else that's going to help you
Yeah.
pay the bills. Like if you're in the elites, even you have to be at least in the top 50. You know, being the bottom 50 is not going to help you. So that's like, okay, there's 50 guys or girls out there that conceivably can make a living between, you know, promote partnerships, sponsorship, and checks. But that's only 50 people in, you know, when you consider, well, there's also MLF and PFL, but even those don't pay that much. So in kayak bass fishing, it's like, well, Hobie B.O.S is Bassmaster kayak series. There's nothing else unless you complement it with something else, and you have to be, you know, in case of Rush Snyder, it's funny because he's not this big social media guy. You think about Ben Milliken, I'm sorry, who's not only a great social media content creator, YouTuber, he's also an elite angler. So there you have two things that attract sponsorship. Okay, I got people that, you know, do content creation, plus he has the credibility of being a great angler. Russ Snyder is like, for all the content that he produces, it's more like, he's bass fishing. Russ Snyder will probably tell you himself, I'm not a TikToker. I'm not a, social media influencer. I just happen to be really, really good. And for him to make a living out of it, I mean, it's great that for him, it's like, yeah, he's the best out there. Somebody that can go out there and pretty much get a check every time.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up Ben too, because Milliken is. I was listening to some of the, I guess, speculation, and he may have even said it himself at the end of the season. Like he was, I don't remember exactly what he said, but he's talking about he's still trying to decide what he's going to do for next year, if he's going to come back to the elites. But I know he was making a living as a YouTuber. He's generating hundreds of thousands of views. He's actually commanding influence, in terms of like the marketing, like people are paying attention to what he's doing.
Yeah.
Like he's one of those guys that can actually, people will go buy products because, hey, this is what I'm using. And I think I think it's really cool that he fished the Elite Series, and I hope he stays. He really he demonstrated to the world, hey, I'm not just a YouTuber. I'm not just cherry picking lakes. Like that dude is one of the best fishermen on the planet.
Yeah.
But he went to become sort of the traditional professional fisherman competing in tournaments, and I think he probably lost money doing that just because he wasn't producing as much content on social media. It's crazy how that's changed. It used to be, if you want to make a living in the fishing world, the tournaments are kind of the way to do it. And for him, it's like I think he like I said, he demonstrated just how good of an angler he is with the year that he had, and then not to mention the EQ season, just qualifying for the elites. But it's cool to. It's a different world with social media now, that you don't have to take kind of that same traditional path. You can kind of do stuff your own way and try different things. And social media is definitely an avenue for guys to make a living in the fishing world without having to get on the road and travel all over the country and, compete against the other top guys. And,
yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's it.
And that case in point, Mike Iaconelli, in order for him to, if he wanted to continue being at the top, with all these hungry young guys coming out of college, you have to choose one or the other. If you want to be like still in the realm of the KVDs and all that, social media can't take the lion's share of your time. But for him, imagine, I don't know Mike Iaconelli, I haven't talked to him about it, but looking at him right now, he's like, no, this is a business decision. What's paying the bills more? He went on to have, I think, for a short time, a TV episode on Fox main network. I think it was Fox Sports, one of those.
Fishing the City Limits or something.
Yeah, something like that. So it was like, all right,
watching that.
Yeah. So and he has his old social media brand and everything. So it's the
Bass University.
Bass University. So him, it's like, all right, what do I want to chase? Do I want to keep staying? Not that he's irrelevant, but obviously he's not what he used to be as far as tournament accomplishments. But it's a business decision. It's like, who's going to blame him for making that decision? And it's not that he's quit on one or the other. It's just like, when you're spread, you can't be a master of two slaves, right? If you want to keep up with content creation, if you're not, concentrating the lion's share of your time and energy toward, some other content creator will. And the same thing, if you're not doing that on the tournament side, some hungry young kid out of college will, and not just one, several of them. So it's hard to kind of split yourself and kind of serve two masters in that way.
Yeah, I agree. It's shoot. I mean, I have a very small social media following, but it's a struggle for me to come up with an idea for a post every day. I try to keep consistent with it, but I'm not good at that, and I'm not fishing a full-time schedule and doing trying to do the social media thing. I can't imagine doing the travel that these guys are doing, the sponsor commitments, all those things. And then it's almost like having a second job of managing the social media, all the other business aspects that somebody at that level has to deal with. It's it talk about a headache. You got to be extremely driven to do all that.
Yeah. It's a young man's sport. Just that we were
Yeah.
born we should have been born 20 years later. Maybe would be able to capitalize it, but we're too old for that right now.
Yeah.
We don't have
I
the energy for both
I'll
or
speak for
one of them.
myself. I am.
Well, hey, this is not this is not highlight. This is natural, silver hair. So, but hey, Justin, I've had you for over an hour and 10 minutes. I did promise that I was gonna, and I'm not gonna talk too long about it, but some tips or tricks for smallmouth bass fishing. You can talk for 5 minutes if you want. I don't want to keep you too long, but where do you find, where do you target smallmouth bass on early fall, and what baits you normally look for?
Well, I guess the last year and a half or so, I've spent a lot more time fishing some small rivers here in Virginia. Um, I really enjoyed, I love my Hobie Outback. I love fishing, the electric outboard on the back and zipping around all the, my tournament rig. But I've had a lot of fun kind of getting back to the roots of the kayak fishing for me, fishing out of a small paddle only, 10-foot kayak in these little tiny kind of places. And a lot of the places that I fish, especially this time of year for smallmouth, the water's pretty low. It's funny that I say that because we've had the last 3 days. It's been pretty heavy rain, so the rivers are coming up a little bit. But typically, a lot of the rivers here in Virginia are low this time of year. So I tend to get, unless we've got some rain, some overcast skies, something to let me power fish. I've tended to do, or I guess lean more on some of the finesse techniques. So something that I've gotten to really enjoy this year. Uh, One bait, that evergreen gizmo, and I should have
Oh yeah,
grabbed it. I've got a couple downstairs, but it's the little bug
yeah.
that
Nolan
Nolan,
Miner made famous on
yeah, he
Susquehanna.
introduced everybody. And I kind of looked at it and I listened. I talked to him after the tournament and he was telling me about it. I was like, man, that's really cool. But I just kind of filed it away and it was like, yeah, maybe one day. I bought a few and I didn't throw them until this year. And I don't know if it was May or June, I started playing around with that bug. And that thing, when it's high skies, you've got clear water, and kind of spooky fish, that's a really sneaky way to catch them. And I think this early fall, I haven't had a chance to get out on the rivers for a couple weeks, but I have a feeling for the next few weeks, at least until it really starts to cool, that's going to be a player for me. Another bait I grabbed is another little finessey deal that I've started leaning on heavily this year. It's a little it's a Ike's micro jig from Missile, and
Hmm.
then they just came out with this little tiny. I don't know if you're familiar with their D bomb. It's
Yeah,
beaver style bait. This is a little micro D bomb that they started making that fits that jig really well. And it's if those fish are same kind of conditions, bright skies, no wind, those fish see really well. Um, but if they're not higher in the water column, if they're down lower, I've found that I can catch them really well with that jig. I've caught some nice fish this year on that, and it's kind of I mentioned that these smallmouths see well. They see a lot better than I used to think they did. Uh, I remember one fish in particular seeing it. Uh, I try to approach from the downriver side. So a lot of times I'm paddling upstream. I get to these little shallow riffles and I'm wading and dragging the kayak up through it. And um, it's nice to have a little tiny kayak for those situations.
yeah.
But I remember, basically sneaking up on one, seeing it from a distance, and I made what I thought was a bad cast. I mean, I bet I had that thing 15 or 20 yards upriver of that fish, and that little tiny bait, little black jig. I mean, as soon as it hit the water, that fish bolted. I mean, it's by the time it hit the bottom, that fish was on it and thumped it. And I'm just thinking, man, the number of times that I've drifted, you know, what is probably way too close to cover before making a cast. It's like seeing, and granted, it was middle of the day, high skies, but that was kind of eye-opening for me, is that these fish see really well when it's clear water, bright skies. I didn't give them that much credit. It was so yeah, that there's a tip. Be as quiet as you can, sneaky. Approaching from downstream works well for me, especially if you're. I'm typically going out and fishing solo, so float trips. You know that. If I had a buddy to do it with, it would make more sense. But for me, I'm pretty much going to go upstream and float back, because the times that I go downstream and then try to work my way back, I always seem to run out of time, and then I'm waiting, dragging the kayak up in the dark. So it's
Yeah.
for me. I've found I've got to force myself to do the work initially, and then at the end of the day, sun's starting to set. Okay, then I get to enjoy riding the current downstream. But when it's tough, I like those baits, and then just I like to throw stuff that's like you mentioned, I think top water earlier. Like there's no more fun way to catch a
Oh,
smallmouth than on top. These plopper, like this is the 75. I think a lot of guys throw the 90 or throw the bigger, like the 110 maybe. I really like this 75. It's got a good sound to it, and then the Chapo 90. I think guys throw the bigger sizes a lot. So places that where these fish are seeing a lot of baits, there's a lot of angler pressure. I feel like those kind of downsized baits can be a little sneaky this time of year, especially as water starts to cool. I really like a walking bait too.
yeah.
I like the Sammy. I think this is the 100 size, but it's got 3 sets of trebles. Um, and largemouth, smallmouth spots, I've had situations where they'll all just kind of, I don't know how to describe it other than they're like bumping it with their nose. They'll knock the bait out of the water and they'll hit it hard, but the mouth is closed. They're not trying to eat it. I think they're just trying to stun it. I feel like with 3 sets of trebles on that thing, I got a better chance to connect with that fish that is just trying to kill the bait.
Yeah.
And then last bait I'll throw out is a chatterbait. Everybody knows about a jackhammer. I love a jackhammer for largemouth. I will throw it for smallmouth, but my go-to for the smallmouth is that little mini max.
Yeah.
And it's a smaller size. It's easier for them to get that mouth around it. I feel like I don't lose as many of them. But if I'm around say I'm fishing a tournament and I've got a good limit, or I've got a limit and I just want to upgrade. There's a lot of guys that throw this big one on the Susquehanna. I started playing around with the big one this year, and I had a couple days where water. It works better when the water has got a little bit of color to it.
Yeah.
It's rising. You got overcast skies, but I had a couple of days where I was playing around with that, and you actually feel the small fish bump it, and they don't get it. It's too big, and you keep reeling. Another one thumps it, little fish, and then the third bite is a really big fish. And had I been throwing the little one in those situations, I'd have ended up catching that little fish, the first or the second one. But that bigger bait, I caught fewer fish, but I ended up with the one that counted. So that's some stuff I like to do. But yeah, this is almost. I love spring, but this is getting into be one of my favorite times of the year on the river, because it's the weather is not quite so hot. We're cooling off a little bit. It feels good to be out there. The water's not too cold to wade still. It's fun to get out there and river fish. And it's not rocket science. I mean, pay attention to current breaks and seams, eddies. Look for something that's blocking current. And they're almost always going to be facing upstream or into that current, and that it's almost always going to be looking upriver.
No, that's good stuff, man. Good juice. Thank you so much, Justin. Like I mentioned, I had you over an hour, but I did promise that I was going to do a little segment about smallmouth bass fishing in early fall. So I really do appreciate you taking the time. I'm not going to keep you on longer because I know it's a little bit later for you than it is for me, but I wanted to give you a couple of minutes to shout out any sponsors, anybody you want to shout out, and again, remind people where they can follow you or listen to your podcast.
Yeah, definitely the podcast. We're on all the major streaming platforms. What is it? Spotify, the Apple, um,
Amazon.
I think Amazon. I mean, I don't remember all of them. There's like 15 different little different
Yeah.
different ways places you can find it. We tend to put the shows out Thursdays. I try to put them out every Thursday. But you can find us over on YouTube, the Serious Angler Network. Um, and yeah, I don't take myself too seriously. I'm just I've said it before. I'm just kind of a guy that likes to fish. I like to fish. I like to talk fishing. So for me, these podcasts are a lot of times at the end of a work day. This is the highlight of the day for me, sitting down and talking fishing with somebody. So
Same
um,
here.
so yeah, you can find me there. If you want to check out my Instagram page, it's just at Justin___ Largen. I would have gone for the one underscore, but somebody else had it. So apparently somebody else out there with the same name.
But he's not as good at fishing though.
No, I don't think they fish at all. If they do, they're no good. No. You want the two underscores. But yeah, and I'll take a minute to thank the guys that helped me out. Dakota is one of them. They power my electronics, my motor. I'm really happy with the batteries that I have from them. Missile Baits, love the guys over there. I've gotten an opportunity to do some cool things with them, so I'm super grateful for them. I've started using cash and rods the last year and a half, and I think I've now got everything switched over to cash, and I really like that stuff. Made in the USA. That's kind of another reason I like Missile. I try to buy American when I can, support the local businesses. Those are a couple of them. I know I'm forgetting. Oh, Hobie Eyewear. If you're looking for a pair of sunglasses, those are they don't have the high price tag of some of the other brands that are out there, but they're very good glasses. And I've got several different pairs for different situations. If you're looking for a good pair of sunglasses for $100 or that, right around there, Hobie Eyewear, check those guys out.
Cool beans, man. That's awesome. Well, Justin, again, thank you so much for everybody that watching or listening. Thank you again for tuning in. Remember, you can leave us a review. Check out our awesome business partners, especially Mariner Sales. If you're in the DFW Metroplex, they have the biggest inventory of kayak and kayak accessories. If you're not in the DFW, even outside of Texas, you can also shop through their website. They have it's what I love about Mariner Sales other than the customer service. It's just they have little like accessories and pieces to accessories. Real quick story. I had the Yak Attack flag. I broke it in half. I didn't have to buy another flag. I just had to buy this stem of the flag. And I was like, that's crazy that they actually sell the flag by parts and that saved me some money. So go check out the website, marinersales.com. So thank you again, everyone, for tuning in, for watching, for listening. And Justin, again, thank you so much for taking the time to join us on the podcast. Hope to get to see you on the water soon. Are you coming to Cattle Lake for Bassmaster Kayak Series close in the year? Or did I
Wish
see
I
you there?
was. I don't think I'm gonna make it. That I'll never say never, but right now it's looking like I'm not. But we'll see. Good luck to you anyway down there. It's
I'll need it.
that place is fun.
Oh yeah,
I've been a few times. I'm jealous that you're as close as you are.
yeah. Well, it's still a forward drive, but yeah, I love it. It's definitely it's becoming one of my favorite spots, along with Caddo and along with Fork and Possum Kingdom. So, well, I hope to see you on the tournament area soon or wherever we get to meet. Maybe the Classic. Have
I
you already
hope.
called? Well, the championship. Have you qualified for the championship?
I haven't. That's part of why I want to get down there. But there is a tournament here in November, Virginia Bass Nation tournament that I was looking at the other day. That it's a few hours from home, so I'm at least going to try to make that tournament and qualify that way, and then we'll see what happens with work next spring. But I at least want to have a chance. I want to get qualified at least.
Yeah,
But
I'm in that same way. I'm 2 strikes away. I got the Texas Bass Nation Championship. If I end up in the top 10%, I qualify. Or if I end up in, I guess, the top 5 on the Bass on Cattle Lake, then I qualify as well. I'm not gonna qualify through AUI points, that's for sure. But we'll see.
You got a shot.
Maybe, you know, a prayer will be answered.
Hey, thanks for having me, Armando.
My pleasure, man. Have a great night. And everybody out there, if you're going to be on the water, wear your PFDs, please. Peace out.